Namaskar.
Namaskar.
First of all, as a formality, not as a formality, but genuinely want to thank the organizers, my own cousin sister and my Jijaji and their family, to give me this opportunity to speak on this topic, that is female deities or goddesses in the Vedic lore. Basically, it is a very happy moment for me because this topic is a very less known topic, and I always like to speak on such topics because being a student and teacher of the Vedic literature for last approximately 25 years, I always feel that Indians uh, do not know much about the Vedas. Even if we are proud of our tradition, very few efforts are done to do this. And therefore, I really genuinely thank them for allowing me to choose this topic and share some of my thoughts with all of you. So let me begin with some introductory part. Uh, in the in the beginning itself, I would like to say some words about what is Vedic and what is post-Vedic. There is a difference between the Vedic literature and the post-Vedic literature. We all are aware that Sanskrit is the ancient language of India and the Indian subcontinent. It is a knowledge. It is a language of knowledge. We call it Jnana Bhasha, and therefore we find multiple texts throwing light on different type of knowledge existing in ancient India, existing in our history. But on the basis of the language peculiarities and some conceptual differences, academically, Sanskrit language can be seen in two different layers. And literature wise, we look at it actually in three different layers. Although you see only two columns in my screen, on my screen, actually there are three different layers in the text. So let me say something about this. When we call something as Vedic literature, it begins with the Rigveda Samhita. And Rigveda Samhita, we can proudly say that it is the most ancient available literature in the world, not only in India, not only in Sanskrit, but it is the most ancient available literature in the world. And that is the position of Rigveda Samhita in the world. Further, you can see Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda are the Samhitas, are the basic Vedic texts. Further, when we go ahead, as the Vedic literature progresses, the next layer of the texts is called Brahmana texts. The third one is Brahmana texts particularly focus on the ritual descriptions, and the previous Samhitas which I said, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda, are different types of prayers of the gods. Then come the Brahmana texts, as I told you. Then come the Aranyakas. Aranyakas are those texts which were supposed to be studied, which were supposed to be chanted in the Aranyas, that is the forests. Then come the world famous layer of Upanishads, the beginning of the famous Indian philosophy. And then the last layer, the end of the Vedic literature, is known as Vedangas. I won't go into deep about these topics, but then we come to the post-Vedic literature. There, the famous Mahakavyas, Ramayana and Mahabharata, they are the connecting dots between the Vedic and the post-Vedic Sanskrit literature. We all are aware that Ramayana and Mahabharata are the famous Arsha Mahakavyas, one written by Valmiki and the other written by Vyasa. Then we have that layer of Sanskrit literature, which is called usually as classical Sanskrit literature, and it has different plays. For example, Abhijnana Shakuntalam by Kalidasa, or Swapnavasava Dattam by Bhasa, or many such, Mritchakatika by Shudraka, etc. Then we have poetry, where again we can give credit to Kalidasa of two Mahakavyas known as Raghuvamsha and Kumara Sambhava, etc. etc. Then come the Puranas, which are again a uh, very famous group of texts which is written in Sanskrit. I want to say something here. People usually commonly mention the Vedas and the Puranas together, but the Vedas are certainly far much ancient than the Puranas, and therefore you can see again the difference, the linguistic difference and the conceptual difference in the Vedas and the Puranas. We all know that there are some melodious and some long, deep Sanskrit stotras. For example, you must be aware of some stotras composed by Adi Shankaracharya, or there are some poems written by Panditraj Jagannath. For example, Ganga Lahari, Yamuna Lahari, etc., etc. We have some famous Sanskrit literature which introduces us to the genre of stories, that is Panchatantra, Hitopadesha, etc. And although I've mentioned it in the last place, it is again a very significant part of Sanskrit texts, that is the philosophical texts, or as we call the darshanas. And these darshanas include Mimamsa, Vedanta, Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Charvaka, etc., etc. So this is a very brief introduction to the Sanskrit literature, which can be certainly divided in the Vedic and post-Vedic on the basis of the language and on the basis of the concepts. Going ahead, I would like to say something about the other part of the title of my topic, that is the deities. So usually the word, many Indian languages have this word Deva and Devi, and in English we generally translate it as a deity or god or goddesses. But when we refer to the Vedic literature, I want to inform you that the words Deva and Devi are derived from the words Dyu. Dyu means the heaven, and Div means to shine. So when you use the word Deva or Devi for someone, it literally means someone who shines, someone who belongs to the heaven, someone who is divine. And therefore, the gods and goddesses were looked upon with an awe by the human beings, because they had something superior, they had something special compared to the human beings, and therefore they were called Devas and Devis, who were brilliant, who were bright, who were shining, and who belonged to the heaven. When I was thinking about this topic, I was trying to find out some common points due to which we call these gods and goddesses as Deva and Devis. What is so special in the gods which is not there in the human beings? What kind of feelings, what kind of emotions do the human beings have about the gods? And these are some of the points which I could see. When you worship a god, when you worship a deity, you are devoted to that deity. So the devotees are completely dedicated or devoted to the deities. Now the question comes, why this devotion exists? Why does this devotion exist at all? Why does it exist in the first place? How does it arise? So when we look at the ancient civilizations, we can see that the people in the ancient times were grateful uh, for the discipline in the world. They were thankful to the gods for the smoothness in their day to day life. And they believed that the days and the nights, the sun and the moon, the rivers and the mountains, the seasons, everything takes place because of these godly powers. And therefore, they had a deep gratitude in their minds, and therefore they were devoted to the gods and the deities. However, we can also see some references in the literature where there was not only gratitude, but there was a kind of fear. they were scared of some unseen or unforeseen happenings in the world. So they were scared of those, and in that case they certainly prayed the gods, they certainly requested the gods to make them free of that fear, to protect them from those unforeseen happenings, and therefore fear was also there. But then we also see some references, we also see some parts in the literature where it is said that uh, because they were protected from these unforeseen happenings, these disasters, these calamities, they had a deep faith in the gods. And therefore, when they had this deep faith created in the gods, they kept on requesting, they kept on praying the gods that may we human beings have your blessings forever, may you protect us forever. And the last point, where there were certain turns in the life, there are certain moments in our lives also where we believe that some things cannot be justified, some things cannot be explained rationally or logically, and in such moments we believe that there is something beyond our perception, there is something beyond human perception, and it is nothing else but the divinity, it is nothing else but the gods who are helping us, the gods who are helping the humankind. And in the present moments, even we are believing, we are thinking, we are praying to the gods that the gods will save us from the pandemic. And we all are hoping that there will be something miraculous, and these miracles were also attributed to the gods, and therefore they were attributed to the gods. And this is how we can look at the emotions towards the gods in a very brief manner. And then we shall go ahead. Now I want to say something about the gods, prominent gods and prominent goddesses belonging to the Vedic times and the post-Vedic times again. You can see a list of the gods in the Vedic times and post-Vedic times. I'm sure you can see the difference. Except Vishnu, there is no common deity in the Vedic India and the post-Vedic India. You can see Indra, Varuna, Agni, Soma, Rudra, and Vishnu can be mentioned as the prominent gods in the Vedic times. Whereas after the Vedic times, we know the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesha. We have Ganapati, we have Ram, we have Krishna, we have Kartikeya. These are the prominent gods. Uh, if I go ahead, uh, in the Vedic times, the goddesses, and the post-Vedic times, the goddesses are different. Again, only Saraswati can be seen common in both the lists. I'm going to talk about these 5 deities in the Vedic times anyway, elaborately after a few minutes. So let me concentrate on the post-Vedic times. We have Parvati, Lakshmi, and Saraswati, one more trinity in the goddesses. And in different regions of India, we have different forms of Parvati, which are worshipped in the Navaratri festival. And basically, these goddesses are the form of Shakti, the power in the women, and which is the basic theme of this lecture series organized here. And therefore, I thought that I should introduce the Vedic goddesses or the Vedic female deities to all of you, so that you can think about the concept of female power even prior to the trinity of Parvati, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. Mm, Before I say something extra say something more about the Vedic goddesses, I would like to say about the beliefs and shraddha of the Vedic people, because it was the ancient civilization. As I said, they believed in the nature, they were thankful to the nature, and therefore, when we look at the different gods in the Vedic literature, many of them are deified or were deified, but originally they were the natural phenomena. So we can see that Varuna, who is a famous Vedic god, was the symbolization of the ocean, or was the symbolization of the sky, or Agni, who was a natural phenomena, and then the human beings could create, could churn the fire, and they started progressing. So all these, not all, I should say, many of the Vedic gods were deified, were made, or were transformed into the gods, but originally they were the natural phenomena. And while talking about these goddesses, we can realize that yes, there is some substance in this theory of the natural phenomena transformed into the gods and goddesses. So, after saying all this, and after looking at the screens, both the slides, you must have realized that the gods belonging to the Vedic part and belonging to the post Vedic part are different. They are not common. But I must say that the feelings and the emotions which we talked about a few minutes back are common. So the Vedic Indians and the post Vedic Indians had the same feelings, had the same emotions about the gods and goddesses. They had a deep gratitude, they were scared, and so they worshipped the gods. They certainly were thankful, and they always requested for different blessings from the gods. So, with this common thread, let me go ahead and say something the about the female goddesses, about the female deities from the Vedic times. So, let us begin. Yes, this is another significant point which I wanted to say. There is not only a difference between the gods, but there is a significant difference, as I said, the conceptual difference between the Vedic and the post-Vedic religion in ancient Indian subcontinent. The Vedic religion is highlighted with the famous yajna, or it is crudely translated as sacrifice in English, but I would use the word yajna itself, because yajna means to worship the gods, but in the form of offering certain food items in the sacred fires, which are called havir dravyas in the Vedic language, and they were offered in the sacred fires. And it was imagined that Agni carries these offerings to the gods who are sitting in the heaven. And in those yajnas, there were mantras and suktas which were chanted to praise these gods. So, without the offerings and without the Vedic mantras, we cannot imagine that a yajna can be performed. So, when a yajna is performed, according to the Vedic people, the offerings and even more than that, the suktas, the hymns, were the most important or the inevitable parts of the god worship. On the other hand, we can see the post Vedic religion, which anyway we also follow. We don't have the concept of offering anything in the sacred fire. We just place the food items in the front of the icons of the gods. So I want to highlight even this, that in the Vedic times, when we read different Vedic texts, which I mentioned in my first slide, we do not find the references to the icons of the gods. We do not find any kind of murti puja, but we find the names of the gods, we find some brief descriptions of the gods, and we find that they were worshipped with the help of yajna and not with the puja which we do these days. Even in post Vedic times, even now, there are certain rituals performed. For example, during Navaratri, the Chandi Yaga is performed, or there is Saptashati Yaga is performed. So these yagas or these rituals are or can be called as the post-Vedic forms or the modern forms of the Vedic yajnas. However, we can see there is a certain difference between the Vedic yajnas and these yagas or these homas which are performed in the later times. So now let me begin with the main topic, and the first female goddess which I am going to introduce from the Vedic times is Usha. Ushas or Usha is the name of early morning or the dawn. And this natural phenomena was revered by the Vedic people. They were grateful to deity Ushas or Usha because when she appeared in the sky, she appeared without fail. So the appearance or arrival of Ushas assured them that everything was in order. Once she arrived on the eastern horizon, the Vedic people had a certainty that the day has started. The sun would follow the Ushas along with the continuation in their smooth life, and all this ensured them about the continuous flow of life, continuous liveliness, which they were always asking for, which they were always praying for. They said that Ushas is Divo Duhita. Divo Duhita means daughter of the heaven, because she always appeared on the beautiful, wonderful, miraculous horizon, which was probably the symbol of this symbol of the heaven, and so she was called Devo Duhita. Now, why she was worshipped by the Vedic people? What speciality was there in Ushas? You can see some important points. These important points I have mentioned from various Vedic hymns, various Rigvedic descriptions of goddess Ushas. The first action which she did was she removed the darkness. We all being the urban people, especially in India, it has become rare to have a look at the early morning and be thankful that the day has begun once again, and a fresh sunny day will start, and we all are living, and we all are thankful to the God. But the Vedic people who are closely associated with the nature were thankful to the gods, were thankful to Ushas, because she removed the monster called darkness. We find these words in the hymns that she removed the monster called darkness. Then, after removing the monster called darkness, the next important action was she awakened every sleeping being and she set the world in the motion. So they could enjoy their life once again, and thus she set the entire world in the motion. Now, why did she do this? Because she wanted everyone to be active, and being active assures prosperity. This was the outlook of the Vedic Indians. Charaiveti Charaiveti. That was the Charati Charato Bhagaha. That was the principle of the Indians, Vedic Indians, that when you keep on moving, when you are active, your fortune also keeps on walking. You also achieve whatever you want to achieve. So Charati Charato Bhagaha means when you keep on walking, your bhaga, your bhagya, your fortune also keeps on moving ahead, and you become prosperous. Therefore, prosperity was an important part for the Vedic people, and they always requested the goddesses and the gods to bestow prosperity on them. And Usha was also not an exception for this. And they said that the Ushas travels in a chariot, which was yoked to the reddish horses, and they prayed goddess Ushas to bestow all fortunes upon them. They also requested her that, O Ushas, graciously answer our songs of praise with bounty and a lot of brilliant light. Now, when Ushas comes and she awakens everyone, and everyone becomes active, there is a there is an attractive change in the surroundings, and that is also mentioned by the Vedic seers, by the Vedic poets in the Vedic hymns. And it says that she was the motivator of various sounds and various actions. Now, those actions and the sounds can be different. For example, you can hear the sweetly chirping birds around you. The Vedic people could hear the mooing cows around them, and the human beings started working. Their day was their day was set into motion, and therefore the Vedic people believed that goddess Ushas was the symbol of brightness, energy, motivation, agility, and a continuous life. And this was the significance, this was the importance of goddess Usha in the life of the Vedic people. Now, let us go ahead and know something about another goddess called Prithvi or Earth. Again, being the urban Indians, we are not much connected with the Prithvi or Earth in our lives, but our Vedic ancestors were certainly different, and therefore we find a long hymn, a long sukta, which has 63 mantras, and it is Atharva Veda 12.1. This is known as Prithvi Sukta, or the hymn addressed to the earth. The Vedic Indians, as I said, the natural phenomena, the natural happenings were important for them. So they were attracted by the color and beauty of the heavenly Ushas. However, she was a miracle for them, a wonder which was beyond their reach. They could see her on the horizon, but they could not touch her. On the contrary, their own earth, their own Prithvi was their own mother. They could stand upon it, they could feel her, they could look at her, and therefore it was she was. I would not use the word it, because in Sanskrit many of these so-called non-living things have the genders like he and she, so I will use the same genders. So they could see her, their mother goddess, their mother earth in front of them, and they could feel her, and it was in front of their eyes. So we find this hymn 12.1 which depicts the grandeur of the goddess earth. Now, why was she so grand for the Vedic people? The first reason which we find in this long hymn is she was a firm foundation. She had lots of mountains and slopes and great plains. Then there were many multiple plants which were standing on the earth. There were rivers and there were oceans. Then it was a home for the human beings. The human beings could dance on it, the human beings could sing on it, and not only this, the human beings fought on this very earth for their own rights. When we look around in the nature, the earth includes the nature, and the earth shelters not only the human beings but the quadrupeds, not only the animals like cattle, horses, sheep, elephants, but it also gives support, it also gives shelter to the serpents, to the scorpions, and even to the tiny worms. So Vedic people were so observant that they observed that this Mother Earth gives shelter to all types of living beings, to all type of life varieties. Then they knew that she also gives support to the food. She supports life and agriculture, because without agriculture, without the food, they could not live their lives. And the Vedic people prominently say this, that the grains like rice and barley were grown, were cultivated on the soil, and therefore they were thankful to her. So the food was a kind of riches, a kind of wealth which supported the Vedic people. But the earth, they were aware that earth not only provides food, but she has wonderful multiple storage of different types of wealth. And therefore, they said that this earth furnishes wealth. She has precious stones. She has gold in her core. Therefore, she was called golden breasted. They have used an adjective, a Sanskrit adjective, Hiranya Vaksha, someone who has breast of Hiranya, who is golden breasted. She provides nourishing strength, and she also provides cattle for us, horses, good fortune and glory to us. And therefore they have used beautiful adjectives for this earth in this earth hymn, in this Prithvi Sukta. And she was called Vishwambhara. She was the uh, she was the supporter, she was the nourisher of Vishwa, everything. She was Vasudhani, she was the possessor of Vasu, she was the storage of Vasu. Vasu means the wealth. Uh, then she was the establishment, she was the foundation, and therefore she was called Pratishtha. And above all, she was called Vishwarupa, because she was the one who um, who could be seen in different forms in different seasons. So in the present rainy season, we can see here in India that the earth is decorated in greenery, and it keeps on changing according to the seasons. So the Vedic people called her Vishwarupa. Then, with this, I also want to say something about the origin of the earth. And you sometimes, when we read the various stories of the gods and goddesses, we realize that some gods and goddesses have some mystic origins, and therefore that adds to their divinity. And even about the earth, the Vedic people believed that formerly she was inside the ocean, she was in the water. We know this story of Varaha avatar of Vishnu, and the Vedic people have described the similar story but in a different way. And so she was uh, placed inside the ocean in deep waters, and the wise seers found her out by their special skills. Therefore, this earth is not a simple entity. Although she is here for us, for the betterment of the human beings, her heart is kept in the heaven because she is closely associated to the gods. And therefore, she is immortal, and she is so important that all the gods protect her without even blinking their eyes. And this is how the goddess Earth was very important for the Vedic people. And at the end, um, we being Vedic Indians, we know that we being the Indians, proud proud descendants of the Vedic Indians, we know that all the above features, uh, with all the above features, the earth was looked upon as a mother goddess. We all believe in the mother goddesses. Again, when we look at the present trinity of Parvati, Lakshmi, and Saraswati, we all know in different stotras, in different prayers, she is called mother, she is called Mata. Why? Because we all believe that the goddess has to be like a mother who is always loving, who is caring, and who is forgiving. So, probably that is the highest quality which is seen in a goddess, by the way, by the Indians. And therefore we can certainly say that the mother goddess is the celebrated concept, is worshipped in the Indian tradition. And again, I will quote Adi Shankaracharya in his Devi Aparadha Kshamapana Stotra. He has said, Kuputro jayeta kvachidapi kumatana bhavati. So a son, a child can be bad, a child can be wrong, but a mother can never be wrong. It was Adi Shankaracharya's belief, and probably Indians also believe in it even now. And the Prithvi can be imagined as the first mother ever who fostered and still fosters unlimited children, and for unlimited number of years. So we can see that the Vedic people were extremely grateful to this Mother Earth, and her being here for their support and their foundation. Now let us see some famous sayings from this hymn. The Vedic man was so proud of goddess Earth that he proudly proclaims, Mata Bhumihi Putroham Prithivyaha. So he said that this soil, this land is the mother, and I am the son of this Prithvi. And this Mother Earth is so caring and so loving that she is Gopa. She is the protector of the whole world. She is Bhuvanasya Gopa. And thus the Mother Earth, the goddess Earth, symbolized firmness, stability, certainty, and fertility. The third goddess in the list of the Vedic goddesses is Saraswati. Saraswati, we all know that Saraswati is worshipped as the goddess of knowledge in the present times, in the post-Vedic times. But let me inform you about this goddess Saraswati in the Vedic times, and especially in the Rig Veda, goddess Saraswati was a river. And there are at least 3 to 4 Vedic hymns addressed to this river Saraswati. I have quoted one significant mantra from Rigveda 2.41, that is the second chapter, 41st Sukta. And this mantra quoted by me here is the 16th mantra from this hymn. It says, Ambitame Naditame Devitame Saraswati Aprashasta Ivasmasi Prashastim Amba Naskrudhi. So here the Vedic people prayed the goddess Saraswati, the river Saraswati, who, according to them, was Ambitama, the foremost water stream, Naditama, the foremost river, Devitama, the foremost goddess, and they requested her that we are aprashasta, we are not known, we are very small people, and may you, O Amba, may you, O mother, naha prashastim krudhi, may you give us the prashasti, may you give us the fame, may you give us the name. And this is how Goddess Saraswati was looked upon by the Vedic people. The question arises why a river named Saraswati was so important for the Vedic people that they call her uh, a river, a goddess, and a mother. Here, when we look back at the history tells us that human settlements came into existence on the banks of different rivers. They settled and flourished due to the river water and fertile lands. The rivers are considered important in the modern world too, for the sake of transportation, for the sake of trade. But um, in the ancient times, because of the settlement on the banks of the rivers and the continuous water provision, the men began respecting the rivers as a mother, as a goddess. We Most of the religious Indians even believe today that river Ganga is the most pious river, and all sins are washed if you take a bath in river Ganga. But when we come to the Vedic tradition, it was Saraswati who represented such a mighty river and the most prominent river in the Rigveda. Some of you must have heard or read about Sapta Sindhu in the Vedic tradition. The word Sindhu here means rivers, and there was a group of 7 rivers, and Saraswati was the most prominent among those 7 rivers, because when we read these suktas addressed to river Saraswati, we read that the poets, the seers, called Saraswati as the foremost among the Saptaswasru, the 7 sisters. And so let us look at the other qualities, the other attributes of river goddess Saraswati. The Vedic people said that, O Saraswati, you are divine, and all generations of the human beings stay with you. So be glad with our sons, and O goddess, grant us the progeny. They said that you are enriched with the sacrifice. O Saraswati, please accept our prayers and bless us always. She was the symbol of immense strength because, with her huge flow and mighty waves, she destroyed the hills and mountains. Her flow was swift and rapid, unlimited, and rushing. So she was superior than all her sisters, as I said just now. The Vedic seers believed that the flow of Saraswati was so immense that she filled the earth and the mid region too. Therefore, they were scared that may this Saraswati protect us from her mighty flow. They considered her great, they considered her greatness as the greatest, and she was the most divine among all streams. And therefore, the poets of Saraswati hymn has advised other Vedic poets that they must praise the goddess Saraswati. She was the giver of prosperity, just like the other goddesses. They requested her that she should bestow prosperity upon them. And here we find a historical reference of a dynasty called Nahusha. And they said that this dynasty of Nahusha, which was established on the banks of river Saraswati, were always prosperous because of her blessing. Then she also helped them to become prosperous. She helps them to become established, and they were so self-reliant that they could destroy their enemies with the blessings of Goddess Saraswati. Being a river, the most important point was she was the bestower of wealth, energy, protection, and food. The poet says that as a person takes shelter under a tree in the heat, we take shelter of the blessings of Goddess Saraswati. May she bestow strength and food to us, men and women who want to expand their families, who want to have children. They praise Goddess Saraswati. And when it comes to the question of protecting her devotees, they have equated Goddess Saraswati or River Saraswati with God Indra, who is supposed to be the most important and most valorous god in the Vedic tradition. So she was given such a great position. So in the as I mentioned in the beginning, there is no doubt that river Saraswati was the most exalted river goddess for our Vedic ancestors. So she symbolized fertility, energy, strength, and swiftness. Now let us look at the fourth goddess in my list, who is Vak, or goddess of speech. We all know that Vedic tradition was the oral tradition. All the knowledge from the Vedic Samhitas and the further texts was imparted to the students uh, through chanting and repeating the mantras. Therefore, in the Vedic tradition, speech is equal to the Vedic mantras and is equal to the knowledge, because without speech, they could not imagine of attaining or earning the knowledge. And therefore, goddess of speech or Vak was one more important goddess, because the yajna which they performed was a significant part of their life, and these yajnas were not possible without chanting the mantras. Therefore, we find a complete hymn addressed to this goddess called Vak, and I have given the numbers of these hymns from Rigveda and Atharva Veda. This hymn is called Vak Sukta, and interestingly, the poet of this sukta is not a poet, not a male, but a female, and her name was Vak Ambruni, and therefore this hymn is also called Vak Ambruni Sukta. So here we can see that slowly the Vedic Indians started looking around them, and they started taking interest in the abstract ideas compared to the natural phenomena which we have seen in the first three goddesses. So they were more and more interested in the abstract ideas, the deep ideas of knowledge, and that knowledge which is nothing else, which was nothing else but the speech for them. So this goddess of speech or goddess of knowledge was the supporter, and she accompanied all gods. She said, now this hymn is in first person. So the goddess of knowledge herself says that I travel with the Rudras and the Vasus and the Adityas and all gods. I hold both Varuna and Mitra aloft, Indra and Agni, and the pair of Ashwins. So this stanza actually includes the names of all important Vedic gods, and goddess of speech, Vak, says that I am the one who accompanies all these gods. So she is also equally important. Then she was the source of vital powers. She herself again says that through me, everyone eats the food which nourishes them. Every man in this on this earth who sees, who moves, who breathes, and who hears, and who speaks is dependent upon me. Without me, you cannot get the food, and so you are completely dependent on me. Everyone may not know it, but I tell you that I am the very reason of your existence. Being a knowledge goddess, she was the bestower of knowledge. And again, the goddess of knowledge says, I myself say this, that I am enjoyable to the gods and men, whomever I desire. It can be anyone on this earth. But if I feel like, if I wish, if I desire, I can bestow the knowledge upon him, and I can make him formidable. I can make him a knowledgeable person. I can make him a seer, and I can make him the wisest one. So she knew about her power of knowledge. And then, because of all this, she had universal existence. And again, about herself, she says that Aham Rashtri Aham Sangamani. She says that I'm the queen. I gather up all the treasures. I am the most thoughtful. I am the first one who knows the value of knowledge. And thus, gods have established me in every house, in many homes, to enter and to reside in those houses, in those families. So, this indicates the dissemination of knowledge in the Vedic society, the dissemination of Vedic knowledge in the Vedic society. In this case, it is a very significant and interesting, curious topic, that how river Saraswati, and that is goddess Saraswati in the form of a river in the Vedic times, and goddess Vak, the goddess of knowledge or goddess of speech in the Vedic times, later came together in the post-Vedic times, Why? Goddess Saraswati did not remain only a river goddess, but was transformed completely in the goddess of knowledge. Uh, some of you must have read about it, and it has been always a point of discussion, always a point of research for the scholars in the Vedic field. So here I have mentioned some more significant points about goddess of knowledge, that is goddess Vak. And I would just highlight the second sentence, Vak va yajna. I have already mentioned that goddess Saraswati, goddess Vak was inevitable for the performance of yajna, because the Vedic yajnas were not performed without the mantras. And here we can see an equation that Vak is equal to yajna. The speech itself is the yajna, because the yajna cannot happen without the speech. And therefore, the goddess of knowledge, the goddess Vak, symbolized power. She was instrumental to please the gods, and she was inevitable in the rites, in the Vedic rites or in the Vedic yajna. Now I come to the last goddess, whose name is Aditi. And here we see, when we read the hymns addressed to goddess Aditi, she was the most abstract. She was even more abstract than goddess of speech. She is known as the mother of Adityas. The Adityas were the gods. It was a group of 8 gods, including Indra, Varuna, Vishnu, Bhaga, Daksha, etc., etc. And she was the mother of those, and therefore she was the mother of all gods in a way. What were her features so that the Vedic people worshipped her? That they believed that she wipes out their crimes, she wipes out the sins done by them. And the most important feature of goddess Aditi, I have quoted a mantra there from Rigveda, first chapter, 89th hymn. It says, Aditihi Devhu, Aditihi Antariksham, Aditihi Mata, Sapita Saputraha, Vishve Deva Aditihi, Panchajana Aditihi, Jatam Aditihi, Janitvam. So here we can see that Aditi is equated, Aditi is identified with everything. She is Dev, she is the heaven, she is Antariksha, she is the mid region, she is Mata, she is the mother, she is the father, and she is the son. Vishve Deva Aditi. Aditi is nothing else but the all gods. Aditi is Panchajana, the famous 5 communities in the Vedic society. And she is the one who is Jatam. She is the one who is born, and she is nothing else but the birth, the continuous life. So when we read this highest description of Aditi, we can imagine how the Vedic people were devoted to her. And when we read this, we easily remember of a later mantra which many of us chant after some pujas, and that mantra is Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva, Tvameva Bandhus cha Sakha Tvameva, Tvameva Vidya Draminam Tvameva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. So any devotee who is devoted to a particular god or goddess always feels that the whole world is included in my Aradhya Daivata or my Upasya Daivata. Everything is found in this one very God. And therefore, whether it is Aditi or Vak or Saraswati or Prithvi or Ushas, the Vedic people were completely devoted to these female goddesses. And with these words, I take leave. I stop here. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you.